As promised, we continue to follow that bombshell decision by the Colorado State Supreme Court. Former President Donald Trump will not be on the primary ballot next year. The state Supreme Court ruling that Trump is ineligible for the presidency under the Constitution's Insurrection clause. It comes after the district court judge, Sarah Wallace, ruled the 14th Amendment did not apply to Trump, but she did say he engaged in the January 6th insurrection. That ruling left open the issue of whether the president was included in the clause of the 14th Amendment that pertained to people who took an oath of office and members of Congress. Trump's attorneys say the former president didn't incite lawless activity. The Colorado Supreme Court obviously disagreed. And Colorado is not alone. On November 8th, the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled that Trump's name would stay on the ballot, saying state law there does not prohibit a name from appearing, even if that person is ineligible to run. And then 6 days later, on November 14th, a judge in Michigan also determined that Trump's name would stay on the ballot, saying the issue is a matter for Congress to decide. Well, that issue is now squarely in the lap of Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold. Madam Secretary, thanks for being with us. Let's get right to it. Two of the brightest minds in law, Lawrence Tribe of Harvard, Judge Michael J. Luedrich, saying you could have made this decision without involving the courts. Will you follow the court's mandate and keep Trump's name on the ballot? And why didn't you just say he can't appear?
Well, thanks for having me on. The Colorado Supreme Court has said that Trump is disqualified from being on the ballot in Colorado because he engaged in insurrection. And I, of course, will follow whatever court decision is in place and believe that the court's decision was right. Donald Trump did incite the insurrection, and I don't think there should be a loophole in the United States Constitution for presidents who want to engage in rebellion. Now, in terms of your initial question, I actually didn't take any action to get this case moving. Actually, 6 Republican and unaffiliated voters filed the case before I took any action as Secretary of State, and that's why it's in the court's hands to start with.
And Trump's attorneys tonight have indicated that they will appeal to the United States Supreme Court. Is there enough time for that appeal to go forward, and what is your deadline for the ballots to be printed?
There is definitely the ability to appeal this case to the United States Supreme Court. And like you mentioned, it's very likely that Trump's team does exactly that. Under state law, I certify the ballot on January 5th. Of course, a court can issue orders. The court could also act very quickly. We'll just stay tuned and hold tight as the court decides how and if they even want to engage in this case.
Madam Secretary, let's go to the heart of what we're talking about here. The law in this case was written after the Civil War to keep Confederates who took up arms against this country from being on the ballot. Do you think what we saw on January 6th rose to that level of an insurrection against the United States?
I believe that January 6th was an insurrection, and I'll go even further in saying that Trump incited it. Look, the former president not only incited this angry insurrection on the United States Capitol, some of whom were intent on hanging the Vice President of the United States to stop the peaceful transfer of power. He then engaged in months of trying to continue to steal the 2020 presidency from the American people. So the wording of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is clear. It says that any person who swears to uphold the Constitution and then engages in insurrection or rebellion subsequently cannot hold office. The Colorado Supreme Court has acted. Trump is disqualified in the state of Colorado from being on the presidential primary unless and until the United States Supreme Court decides to act otherwise.
Madam Secretary, Republicans argue that Donald Trump was never tried. But it should be pointed out, and I brought this up with another guest, neither was Robert E. Lee after the Civil War. Is it a valid argument that this is an issue that should have been decided by a court, and then the argument becomes which court?
It's a valid argument that the issue should be decided by a court, and that's exactly what is happening in this case. Both a district court and then the Colorado Supreme Court have weighed in. Look, there was a very easy way to avoid this whole situation. And that was Donald Trump accepting that he lost the 2020 election. He couldn't accept that. He decided instead to have, various schemes to try to steal it from the American people. That's the only reason this court case is playing out. I think the Colorado Supreme Court got it right. The president is not above the law or the Constitution. And if any other elected official were to be barred under the Constitution from engaging in rebellion, well, so is the president or former president. The Colorado Supreme Court and District Court also have decided that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. So I think, the court's decision is that he is not going to appear on the Colorado ballot unless the United States Supreme Court weighs in.
Speak to arguments that the Trump campaign is going to make that the Biden political machine is out to get him. Was this a case about January 6th, or was it about politics?
Well, I think that argument is pretty far from the truth, given that the people who brought this case were 6 Republican and unaffiliated voters in the state of Colorado. So you had Republicans and unaffiliated saying that Donald Trump is barred because of his actions. But look, Donald Trump lies. That's what he does. He tries to sway people through misinformation, lies, and conspiracies. I'm sure that we'll hear a lot of conspiracies from Donald Trump and the people around him, because they'll do anything to try to grab onto power, whether it's stealing the presidency from the American people, lying, inciting violence against his very own vice president, inciting violence against election workers. The words that Donald Trump says, I don't hold in high esteem. And the fact of this matter is 6 Republican and unaffiliated voters brought this case. It was decided first by a trial court who decided that he engaged in insurrection, then went to the Colorado Supreme Court, which again decided he engaged in insurrection.
I'm going to put up the Colorado vote on the screen so that people understand that Colorado was probably not going to be a contested state with regards to who wins the state. You can see that Joe Biden carried a clear margin in Colorado, but I want to go to an issue that could happen in the future. What happens if Trump voters decide to write his name in on the ballot? Will those ballots then be tossed?
The Colorado Supreme Court actually weighed in on that, and those votes would not be counted. You only count votes for candidates who are eligible. So if someone decided to write into their ballot that their vote went to the local dog celebrity, those votes wouldn't be counted because a dog isn't eligible to serve as president. Likewise, write-ins, as long as the Colorado Supreme Court decision stays in place, will not be counted. As Secretary of State, it's my job to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. Where there are these gray areas, a court weighs in. And actually, in Colorado, there's a mechanism for a court to weigh in very quickly on issues about ballot qualification. I will follow whatever decision is in place by the time of certification, which is January 5th.
Madam Secretary, before I let you go, Fani Willis has been threatened. Tanya Chutkan, the judge in the federal case, has been threatened. Letitia James has been threatened. Judge Ingeron and his law clerk have been threatened. What has your life been like since this case moved forward?
I'll tell you that not much changed when this case moved forward. It changed in 2021 when Trump tried to steal the presidency. I have received hundreds of death threats. With the filing of this case, I did not file this case. Republican and unaffiliated voters filed it, and I was a defendant in the case. Within the first 3 weeks, I received 64 death threats and over 900 non-lethal threats. But I'll tell you what, I won't be intimidated. I will not be stopped from doing my job. And my job is delivering safe and fair elections to the people of Colorado, so every Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated can have their voice heard.
Madam Secretary, we wish you well and we wish you safety. Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.